Hi and welcome to MMA Live TV. It's been a while since we've been on air. There've been a lot of fighter interviews, which have been great. It's been great talking to guys in the MMA community. And if you already haven't seen, guys, please check out some of the interviews. We've got an amazing interview by UFC fighter Jordan Griffin. Frank the Crank Camacho, a friend of the show, has also joined us to speak. So please check out those videos. I'm going to pop up links. Also, please subscribe to the channel. We really want to grow this channel and share as much information out there. But look, let's talk about the event of the hour, which is UFC 249. Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson. And wow, did anyone ever... okay, tell me this. Who put some actual money on Gaethje? Like, here's the interesting thing talking to people out there. A lot of people favored Gaethje to win. I mean, like, you have a puncher's chance when you literally have a punching repertoire that Justin Gaethje does. But I think in the back of the mind, a lot of people thought that Tony Ferguson would take care of business. And I don't know if it's just because we really, really want to see this Ferguson versus Khabib fight, which, lo and behold, is it could happen now. But the impact and the gravitas that as a fight has now basically isn't the same. I mean, he's lost. It's lost a little bit of its allure. That's a fact. What else? I mean, yeah, look, let's run through this fight. It was interesting. Look, the pundits and a lot of the MMA media were saying what was, relatively predictable in terms of how this fight would go to. If it went the distance, it would be Tony Ferguson, because we believed that the cardio and simply the weapons that Ferguson had were much more diverse than Gaethje. And we believe that if the fight was won within, the first 3 rounds, it would be Gaethje because of his earth-shattering power. But lo and behold, all of those predictions were thrown out. And we saw a stand-up affair, which was quite entertaining. It was really interesting. As I kind of, predicted, this fight was really going to be a tale of two tapes in terms of pressure fighters, but we saw a very different sort of pressure applied by Justin Gaethje. And what do I mean by that is a lot of the engagements were obviously in the center of the octagon, and we didn't have any one fighter for any long or prolonged periods, or actually any periods of time, get each other across the fence. And this is important because Gaethje finished his last couple of opponents across the fence when they were going back and their footwork wasn't there, right? But they were both met at the center of the octagon, and you definitely had that, trademark Tony Ferguson forward pressure. But what was interesting is, and I don't know if this fight felt, at least for me, it felt a little bit slow in some of the engagements, but you really saw a sniper out there in terms of Justin Gaethje, in terms of his hooks, his uppers, and he was torching Tony really consistently and early and often. He went to that well. I think, in the first round, we definitely saw it go to Gaethje, and I think it was interesting. Tony Ferguson, I tell you what, I saw a tweet on there which basically said that Tony Ferguson's chin needs to be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Absolutely, take a fucking clap on that one. That absolutely needs to occur. Man, that guy is a White Walker. He can absolutely take some damage moving forward. But what was interesting is we usually see a lot, Tony didn't necessarily fight long. He was willing to engage in the pocket, but unlike a lot of his other opponents, it seemed like there was a decidable... And here is something I haven't necessarily seen, and maybe it's an oversimplification, but I really think that there was a hand speed difference between both guys. And in the pocket, Justin Gaethje, and maybe it's not necessarily hand speed, but the cadence in which he was able to deliver his strikes was touching Tony early and often. And Tony wasn't able to get that, 1-for-1 output that he does, or the 2, 3, 4 combinations that he usually does, especially with the jab. And he was... the longer fighter, I think by 6 inches. So it's really interesting. And I think here's the thing: you're born with these gifts and you have these natural sort of talents. But it's one thing to go in there and to initiate a game plan. And I felt, granted, I didn't hear a lot in the corner in between rounds, but you could tell that Tony was. He wasn't really either being instructed. I could be wrong. I probably need to go back and really rewatch that fight again there. But it felt that he was really in the mode of fighting. What I mean by that, in the first, second round, he was standing up, he was G'd up, he was asking for the cut man to come, and that wasn't happening as well. So there were, elements at play over there. But honestly, he wasn't getting a lot of advice. Trevor Whitman, on the other hand, was giving really clear and concise advice to Gaethje, and I think really this is the value of a world-class, coach. A person that's able to read on the fly. Because the thing is, as a fighter, you're processing information and reacting in real time. So a lot of what you said, in terms of, unless you're really disciplined in terms of game plans that have been amiss, can be thrown out. And I felt that potentially that's what happened with Ferguson. He was really getting beaten to the punch early and often. Definitely the case in the first round. And I think in the second and third round, he was of the volition, and of the belief rather, that Gaethje would slow down. And I think a lot of people felt that way, including myself and some of the boys that were watching the fight with me. But lo and behold, the second round happened. And it's interesting because, again, I use the term sniper. Justin was really sniping at these in the pocket exchanges and landing early and often. And here's the thing, Tony was taking it. He was absolutely taking it on the chin, on the jaw, on the face. He was a hamburger patty by the end of it. Like, he can take a punch. It kind of actually reminded me of Ortega versus Holloway in terms of the amount. He was taking a lot of damage, and it really wasn't until... No, he definitely was bleeding after the first round, but like he wore it on pretty hard towards the end of the fight. But yeah, to me, really, it's the poise and elegance of Gaethje in terms of his strikes and how he chose it. And he never once did these like aggressive flurries that we're kind of, I wouldn't say used to in the last couple of fights, but we associate rather with the reckless fighting style of Justin Gaethje. And really hasn't he evolved as a fighter? It was amazing to watch. A couple of observations in the second round. At the conclusion of it, Tony came up with a strong uppercut. And it really would have been interesting if that strike had been, dished out pretty early on in the round to see how Gaethje would have responded and if there was actually an opportunity there. But I think that was really the only really ultra significant strike, significant being the word, because he did touch Gaethje here and there. But it seemed like Tony was a step slower. And I don't know if this was a lot to do with the evasion that we were seeing with Gaethje or the general ringmanship from a boxing and a close quarters perspective, but he just did not seem effective. I'm not too sure that we saw any elbow by Tony, which is really interesting because, in the pre-fight and UFC countdown, he did note that he was going to bring the blades out, blades being the elbows, for this fight. Yeah, it was entertaining. It was definitely entertaining, but I do feel that it was fought at a consistent rhythm and cadence of pow, pow, check, check, pow. In terms of the way that Gaethje was really sizing Tony up. And I think it was in the third or fourth, Gaethje sat down, and he was definitely in the second, he was winging a lot of punches and hitting 110, 120%. And Trevor Whitman told him, like, calm down, homeboy. You need to calm down. Focus on landing as opposed to trying to take him out. And again, this is really where you see a world-class cornerman, a world-class coach able to do it, to give really clear and concise advice in the heat of battle. And that's one thing. The thing is, Justin actually followed it. And that's another thing. I mean, we've seen the likes of Kevin Lee and other sort of fighters say that, they definitely heard their advice, but they decided sort of otherwise. And I think this is what makes Gaethje really powerful as a fighter, in that he's really able to not only adapt on the fly because of the advice that is being given, but just react on it. The stoppage in the fifth round, I've definitely never ever seen Tony Ferguson stagger like that. But man, the amount of punishment this guy took, I think it's just amazing. It's a testament to Tony Ferguson. And I've been a Tony Ferguson fan since day one, and I still will be there. But man, he was made to look quite average by Justin Gaethje, which just shows that in any one time there are levels to the game. Wow. I'm kind of speechless. And the conclusion of the fight, Herb Dean waved it off. I think there were just a couple of straights that Tony took straight on the face, and he was bleeding profusely. By this time, he staggered kind of backwards, as if it had a really big night out, and it was over. And I think it was a good stoppage. by Herb Dean. There just is a point where, if you have a fighter, and we saw this with Tyson Fury. His cornerman had a lot of backlash, but man, that's what your corner is paid to do, and that's what the referees are paid to do. At this point, it was really academic. I definitely didn't see Tony doing anything in the last minutes to win that fight. Much less win that fight with an ending strike or a submission. It was really interesting, and I think we've seen this with a lot of fighters in that they go in with supreme confidence, and obviously that's what got Tony Ferguson to the dance, the diversity in strikes, the awkward sort of movements, which he definitely did employ, but when it doesn't go your way, he found it very hard to adjust on the fly. I mean, a lot of us were saying, the guys that were watching the fight, that he needed to initiate a takedown to try and change things up. And obviously Gaethje is a world-class wrestler. Not saying that'd be easy, but if you're getting outstruck on the feet, like you gotta make that mathematical equation that probability is probably saying at least by the third round that you're not gonna get there with the same sort of tact. And we've seen this time and time again. And here's here's the delicate nuance in terms of coming up with a game plan, actually going through with it, but being able to dynamically shift on the fly. And that's what the great guys do. And then again, like when we think of some of the best fighters, and we think of, the George St. Pierre's, the John Joneses of the world, and, those two individuals that I've just noted, the reason that they're so effective is they can control the fight on two dimensions, on the feet and on the ground. And I think really Tony Ferguson has a pace and a repertoire of strikes that is very unique to any division, much less the lightweight division. But I think getting those clinches and those trips, and he's got a very opportunistic is the word ground game, but really high caliber in that particular regard. I mean, he's got the most death chokes in lightweight history. He has that ability to submit people, right? He should definitely work towards initiating that to get to the ground instead of being opportunistic in how that occurs. But I've no doubt that he'll bounce back. What's next for Tony Ferguson? It's interesting. I like a Poirier or a Hooker, but I know that those two are scheduled to fight. So it really gets interesting. There's no doubt that he gets pushed back into the line a little bit, but he is still well caliber and he should definitely be given a chance. Obviously, this kind of robs us of a Khabib versus Tony fight, but that was going to happen when he took as many chances as he did. And Justin Gaethje was, probably upon reflection, a very dangerous fight. But here's the thing: once you start going up in the top 5 ranked fighters in the lightweight division, they're all really aggressive fights. So I'll move on to Cejudo and Dominic Cruz. Cejudo, is he really retired? Let's go to the fight first. This was interesting. This was an interesting fight. And the only reason that I had Cejudo as a pick is in my mind, it's absolute, and it's the reason that I had Ferguson, is that you've got to go, like Cejudo has proven himself. No matter what people say, he has been forged. His iron has been forged in hot fire. Like beating Demetrius Johnson, beating TJ Dillashaw. Like I don't care about like the weight cut for TJ. Marlon Moraes, that fight to me was, it's funny talking about a guy so young and with so much to potentially gain from a career perspective by staying and lose, I guess, and we'll talk about that. But the Marlon Moraes fight was one where I really got impressed by Cejudo because, that just showed to me that extra level that it took for him to win. And this is things like Tony Ferguson's of the world have, in that they're willing to increase the threshold of pain to win. But anyway, look, I digress. Let's go on to the fight. There was a sizable size advantage, obviously, in terms of height. But what was really sort of interesting was to see Cejudo come in with these vicious leg kicks. He took a page out of the Marlon Moraes book and was chopping that leg for Henry. And I thought, he was going for it. Like they weren't small kicks. They were like at full sort of pelt, and you could hear it. And that's the amazing thing about the fights that we saw in UFC 249. Without the crowd, you can really hear sounds of war, as I call it. It was really amazing to hear that. Um, Interesting. They got in a couple of scrambles, and I could see that. And this is where the height thing really does matter in MMA. Henry Cejudo is a world-class wrestler. He's an Olympic caliber wrestler. But because of the size and the awkward angles of Dominic Cruz, he was really struggling to get a grip on that guy and really get any sort of success in terms of bringing him to the ground. So any sort of engagements in the octagon over there would result in Dominic Cruz going out. But to me, there were a lot of sort of exchanges that were happening here. But the most... And definitely towards the end of the first round, you could see that Dominic was getting back to his cadence of awkward sort of movements, confusing Cejudo. Cejudo didn't really bite on a lot of feints, but he was touching him here and there. Nothing, however, to really... No significant strike to daze and affect Cejudo at that sort of level. So when we come into the second round, I thought we definitely saw a lot of Dominic coming in and getting that striking sort of cadence. And it was really interesting to see. But yeah... It was a really fast interchange at the corner of the octagon. And Henry caught Dominic diving in with a perfect knee. And those knees normally put people to sleep. And it definitely absolutely damaged Dominic Cruz. Henry came in, hit him with, I counted 10, 11 to 12 sort of punches. And it was over. The referee called it over. What do you think about the stoppage? Definitely looking at from first glance, the first thing I said was that it was an early stoppage. And this was just based on it in real time, not even seeing that Dominic Cruz had started to kind of get up. I think what was interesting was it just felt quick. But when you look at it in slow motion, there were 10 to 12 strikes. I mean, at what point do we look at fighter welfare? I understand that, there are huge implications on the line, huge money transactions happening here as well. But obviously Dominic Cruz wasn't happy about the stoppage, but very impressive by Henry Cejudo. Again, really interesting because prior to that, I would say that prior to that knee strike, which is, you get caught, it was perfect timing, and all kudos to Henry. You would say that I would think that Dominic was coming back. Like, he was definitely getting the striking cadence, and it would be interesting to see there. But what was definitely reported in that fight, and is true, is the knockout power between both fighters, and definitely in that particular regard, Henry Cejudo held the advantage. And yeah, I think what was more interesting to me was the fact that as he started talking to Joe Rogan, his language was affirming towards that of retiring, and I'm like, nah, can't be. Maybe he's a dad. I don't know. Can't be. And then he announced his retirement. Shock horror to the world. And that was amazing. That was shocking. Sorry. That was absolutely shocking. I don't know what to say there. Apart from the fact that good on him. And he retires as a really decorated fighter. And you've seen a lot of fighters go well past their prime. BJ Penn being a prime example there. Pun intended. But is it too early? Like, a lot of his fights had, say as you want, question marks. They were razor close, but I think from a legacy perspective, it holds him in good stead because he's got an impressive resume. Is this a negotiation tactic? I've seen this being asked. I've seen this on Twitter, and it could be. Obviously, for the right number, everyone's there, but I think he's going to be back. I think now that, this is just my summation, not knowing the guy and everything that I've read and just looking at his body language. The thing is, when you retire that early, you definitely allow yourself the opportunity, because he really is in his physical prime, to come back in a year. And I think layoffs, I've just watched The Last Dance, and to see what that little layoff had for Michael Jordan in terms of a rejuvenation, it could potentially have there. But look, at the end of the day, we're just speculating here, right? That division is stacked. The youth in that division is stacked. You've got Peter Yan. You've got Aljamain Sterling. Corey Sandhagen. Marlon Moraes is still a stud. Yeah, it was interesting. Look, UFC 249, there was a lot to talk about, and we'll probably have something a bit later on talking about the card in totality. Vicente Luque versus Nico Price, an amazing fight. Cowboy Pettis, good fight. Ngannou. Damn, son. That was a freaking 20-second... I was like watching a video game. It was ridiculous. Homeboy went to get a beer and some chips, and when he came back, the fight was over. That's how quick it was. It was a great fight. It was a great card. I'm ultra pumped to have the UFC back, and ultra pumped to get back on YouTube just to have a couple more face to faces with you, the audience. Guys, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Share it with any of your friends if they're into MMA, and we'll chat soon. Peace.